So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the resilience. For this is the last part of our today intensive, very intensive symposium to discuss animals, narratives, and wildfires. And so we end up with a second roundtable, a roundtable to discuss the vulnerabilities and the contexts of vulnerability of animals and humans, and whether we can talk about shared common vulnerabilities or not, and how to address them, and bearing in mind that we are always working as a work in progress, so this is a brainstorm session, and so we welcome all ideas, all contributions, the ABIDE team. So I will introduce our speakers in this roundtable, and I will start by my right side. Sorry, need to switch the... So on my right side, there is Margarida. Margarida Lopes Fernandes is an advisor of the ABIDE project. And Margarida shares this very particular feature because she is a conservation biologist working at the National Conservation Agency in Portugal, ICNF. But she's also a doctor in anthropology, in particular anthropology of nature and animals, so working with animals, doing ethnography with namely big carnivores. And Margarida is working with the ABIDE project also in our methods, our multispecies methods of camera trapping and of analysis of those images and the ecological assemblages in order to understand better how animals recuperate in the region of Serra da Estrela. So it's an honor to have Margarida in our advisory board and to have her here today in this discussion. On my left side, we have Professor José Luís Ezer. José Luís is also a member of the advisory board of the ABIDE project, and is a full professor of the Institute of Geography, which is our the closest neighbor within our own university, the University of Lisbon. José Ezer is a physical geographer, so he's a natural scientist. So we have like these social scientists, natural scientists, and this mixed breed, the social and natural scientists. And I will introduce Maria in a while. And so José is also an expert, an internationally recognized expert in risk and disaster, namely risk assessing risks, in particular fire and landslides. And you may remember that we mentioned that also in some of our presentations, that landslides often come after the big fires, and so he's helping the team and the project also in this bringing all these expertises which help us to address the vulnerabilities of humans and animals more from the geological, physical point of view of the landscape and of the geography of the place. And finally, on my right side, after Margarida, we find Maria Sari. Maria Sari is a social scientist. She comes from the field of education, but with an expertise and a master in animal law. And Maria collaborates with the Human Animal Studies Hub for a while. She's now a researcher and co-leader of the education package of a project which takes place and is being developed in the University of Oulu about multi-species justice. So Maria has an expertise in this particular field of multi-species justice, and she has collaborated for long in projects in the Human Animal Studies Hub in this interface with the schools and education, working with children in schools here in Lisbon and also outside Lisbon, bringing this topic of climate change, animal rights, how to address animal as subjects with the students, as Kwai was also mentioning a while ago, like this need to work with the younger generations. That's the expertise of Maria, so lots of questions probably for Maria on that. So thank you, the three of you, for being here today, and also for making us company in the Abide project, not only today, but throughout all the process of brainstorming and all the support that all of you give to the whole team into our work. And so I may begin to prompt the discussion, I may begin by asking, I'll just throw it to the table, and let's see if someone wants to take the lead. What would be, from your points of view, the shared vulnerability, or the ones that we could highlight, these shared vulnerabilities of humans and animals in face of wildfires? So which ones would you highlight?
Maybe we can start with some of the obvious shared vulnerabilities before we move to the tensions and some of perhaps the contradictions or differences. So some of the shared are obviously the physical threats to our bodily liberties and now our being, so burns, smoke inhalation, death. And Australian scholar Blanche Verley has actually written a piece on breath and breathing as one of the ways in which we can understand shared vulnerabilities between humans and more than human beings. And then we can go on to looking at the bigger picture beyond our bodies, the habitat destruction, and also the temporary and permanent displacement of humans and animals. Yeah, perhaps those are two points to share before giving the floor to the other panelists.
Right. Hi. Can you hear me? Yes? It's interesting. I was thinking that these vulnerabilities also have this individual level and population level or community level, like we talked in the morning. And I think Maria mentioned a lot at the individual level, which I agree. And at that level, I would add, and this I'll come up with my sensibility mostly as biologists. They both have a sense of belonging to a place. They have a territory, but they have a feeling towards that familiar place that they use and explore and communicate with other beings of their species and different species. They both have valuable resources, food, shelter there. They feel secure. They have cubs, or they have children. The humans have children. They have duties to their community. They might have a role. This all brings, I think, different dimensions to what the disaster or the wildfire can bring. At a different level, not so much as the individual, they inhabit lands that somebody else manages, that somebody else made a plan or have a strategy or an interest, like forest production, and they don't have a voice sometimes in what that use is. A new plantation, the case of Serra da Estrela is very obvious. There is a political strategy they sometimes don't even know very well. And they both subjected sometimes to, after the disaster, to a plan that is at a macro scale and doesn't necessarily think of their individual needs or their local realities. And the rest Mary already said, is their tension. It's just wanted to say that a wild animal, if they have to restart after a disaster, just the loss of energy, just like with humans, it's immense, and to restart, it's not the same as for all ages and for all individuals.
Yes. Maria and Margarita already put over the table most of the most important topics, in my opinion, also. So, it depends always on the magnitude of the intensity of the fire. Okay, so in some cases, the problem is maybe not so huge, but focusing our attention on the huge mega fires, then of course the direct threat to life and health for both human and animals and other animals, as well as the habitat, livelihood, the extraction. Okay. Furthermore, maybe the problem of displacement and of spatial fragmentation. Okay, and the looking on the recovery phases, and because evacuation, if it is huge, massive, breaks up social networks, and if it lost force a lot of days, this can be also a problem. Namely, when looking on the next phase, the coming back to the fields, and also I think that there is also a long-tail recovery, which means the loss for the huge mega fires, the loss of ecosystem services may slow both the ecological rebound, but also the economical rebound. So this means that in the same place we have these two type of problem, not looking yet for the conflicts, because there are also, of course, a lot of conflicts, looking on the way the fire interacts with humans and non-humans in the same place.
Thank you. Thank you. It was, quite an extensive list. I'm taking notes. It's quite thorough. And I was thinking, so picking on the last things the three of you said, if we could then think about the tensions, what would be, from your point of view, the most important nodes, and in which, for instance, for humans to recover, then some animals can't recover, or the other way around. And we've addressed already during these 2 days, for instance, the case of boars. I'm thinking the case of wild boars in the north. There we feel there is a tension in which, when the species, or even though we praise recovery as an abstract concept, then the species that recover better, sometimes they become a problem. So there's this, we find that there may be a tension. So I was curious to know what you think and what are thoughts on these possible tensions and how we could address them in the field.
Okay.
Very orderly.
Well organized.
So, related to some of the tensions, I think it's important to highlight some of the vulnerabilities that exist preceding the event of disaster or the event of a fire, for example, and looking at a lot what came about yesterday about the Portuguese coverage, for example, was about economic loss. So if we take, for example, animals in these industrial food systems, that brings into question then who has the right to recover after a wildfire? And what does it look like to these animals? What does recovery in these systems look like then? It might be more intensified forms of exploitation where factory farms will be protected better from fires so we don't have more economic loss. Is that better for these animals? So rightfully so, there is a lot of discussion of recovery of wild animals in these multi-species wild communities who perhaps find their ways of adapting to life post-fires, but what about the vulnerabilities that exist prior to these fires, and especially the animals who are classified as resources? So, for example, food animals who are not given the right to recovery because post-fires, their life is likely going to look like more exploitation, more violence, and more oppression. So I think that should that merits some discussion. So who is also given the agency to recover or the agency to flee? And that was something that came about yesterday in the presentations, also about captivity and control, not just for animals in industrial systems, but also just companion animals, so those who are chained. So who has the agency to not only flee the fires, but who is given the right to recover or the freedom to recover after the fires?
Okay, just thinking about this other perspective, which is always interesting. I also was thinking about the prevention of wildfires, because I think there are some tensions there and collide of interests. For instance, scrublands in Portugal have been always seen as a non-interest habitat, and for the animals it's shelter, it's food, is a way of escaping hunters. So scrubland, in the mainstream narratives, I think of wildfires, and unfortunately I was not there yesterday here, so I don't know if you talked about it, but I think scrublands in the narratives of wildfires are always accused of being the ignition, of being the cause of fires, while the type of trees we have in the center of the country in Portugal are obviously very prone to fire. So by cleaning scrublands, there's a conflict between what is technically think that it's important for prevention of fires and what is important for animals. And this is a tradition that comes from agriculture anyway. And after the fires, also I thought about the conflicts of the damage in livestock. So as we talked before earlier on today, if farmers are more isolated, and after a fire in particular, their cultivation, their fields are more prone to conflict or to have damage by wildlife than before. So some prevention measures are important here. And obviously hunting as well can be it is obviously a conflict of interests, although it depends on the type of hunting and when. Usually after fires it's not allowed, but I'm sure that the period that it's established could be discussed and taking more into account the animal perspective.
Yes, I also start by the prevention. I think because the tensions starts during the prevention. Besides the problem of the shrublands, because it's in fact when we analyze from statistical point of view, the burnt area, the shrublands is on the top, much on the top than other kind of land use into the country, and this of course can be a tension, a potential tension element. But of
top of the burnt areas.
Yes, yeah.
So
Yes, they are on the top of the burn. Yeah, they burn the most. Yes, despite not always with the most highest intensity. But in fact, looking on burnt area, typically the shrublands are the most burnt in this country. But also, when you look on the back burning and the fuel breaks, which are managed by the ECNF also, I'm not confident that the design of these fuel breaks are always designed looking also on the wildlife perspective, which means this. They are designed and they are implemented in the field like buffers, yeah, and quite seldom, namely along in the most divide zones along the highest areas, and in fact they are able, at least in some case, to help to maintain and to stop the wildfire there. but at the same time, they work as a barrier also for wildlife, even in periods where there is no wildfire. Okay, so the perspective, the design of these breaks, because we are talking about breaks on the vegetation. So in the most extreme situation, there is nothing there. Okay, so I think that this is frequently not account. The wildfire perspective is not, or the wildlife, perspective is not taken into account when they design these full breaks. In any case, the full breaks are necessary. We need this also in order to try to stop the huge fires in some places. Okay. Also, some additional possible situations or examples of tension is, for instance, the use of locally the use of the water during suppression, because the firefighters use it, of course, but in quite seldom. The zones where the water is available are also important zones from the wildlife perspective into the land. So, of course, you are not asked. Fortunately, you are not asking me answers to solve the problem. We are only doing a diagnosis. Okay, so, but in fact, this is another, because usually these are the most interest areas regarding wildlife in these areas. Yeah, and I think this should be or can be some of the most tension, important topics.
Yeah, focus of tension. Thank you very much. And I was thinking also while I was listening to the three of you, and when Maria mentioned which species have the right to recover, do we acknowledge the right to recover? And I was thinking, and what do they recover to, right? What kind of world are we recovering those species to? Because there's this abstract concept of recovery, like we go back to the primal state, which pretty much the communities we've been talking to, they acknowledge it's not possible to go back to that previous state. So in that sense, there's no recovery, there's something else, a reconstruction or a construction of a different state. But in particular to those animals that are confined in those industrial factory farm facilities, for instance, what are we recovering them to? What kind of lives? That's something that I was thinking. And these aspects you mentioned about the water and the natural resources are very important, and actually they have a history. People used to fight about the water sources, right? Remember in the small villages, people got killed even because of the water, because it's a scarce resource in some places. And I was wondering, how can we address these tensions? And again, we're not looking for direct answers, because if we had them, everything would be solved. But just to brainstorm about possible political measures to jointly address these tensions, that we could point to political stakeholders, try to bring them into this topic. I wonder if you've ever thought about this and would like to share your thoughts.
I can start, and I will start also with another an additional tension, typical tension associated to wildfires, which are the problem of evacuation, when it is necessary to evacuate, and this is related with, of course, with animals, not the wildlife, but the other animals, the pets, and also the livestock, and it is, in my opinion, absolutely necessary to redraw the emergency plans for wildfires, at least for sure in Portugal, but I believe also in other countries, because the people do not evacuate because of the pets and because of the other animals they have into the farm. And we can understand why, of course, because these animals are part of the family, finally. And this means if the public policy does not acknowledge this problem, they have, of course, at the end of the day, another problem to solve. Okay, so of course this means that the emergency plan must to be redrawn. They must to include this topic, which means it's not a problem of the plan. Of course, also the shelters should be adapted in order to accommodate also not only the pets but also the livestock. Of course, it depends on the size of the livestock, because in some cases maybe it will not be easy. But in such cases, the idea is to define the place where the livestock lives and to redesign it to work itself as a shelter. Okay, so and I think that this plan should be much more clear and should oblige the owners of the land to maintain. Of course, if it will be a mega fire, then the possibilities to maintain the people and the animals into the small villages can be a little bit more complicated. But evacuate is also a very complicated issue, and of course, there is no single opinion about this, because it is always really, really complicated for the guys that are in the field, and when they face the need to decide should we evacuate or not, okay, and the idea is to try to maintain the people there. And if you decide, okay, because it's also a matter of choice, which means we can decide from the political point of view and from the public policy, okay, let's try to do our best in order to maintain people there and not to evacuate. And if you decide for this option, then the possibilities to maintain safe the animals increased a lot, in my opinion.
And you mean the farms, not the villages?
Not the village.
No.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
So
On the farm, yeah, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Also, and it is the same, in my opinion, for the small families that live there.
Mm-hmm.
They can be much more safe, not running away, than stay there. Mm-hmm. The point is to increase the safety conditions into these places, which means to clean the terrains in the surroundings of the houses, but also, of course, in the surroundings of the places where the livestock lives. Yeah, it's because and so trying to limit the evacuation at the most, because the evacuate is always a complicated thing. Yeah.
I'll pass it on to the next one, but before that, just to say that it would be very popular among the farmers we interviewed in Serra da Estrela, because that's exactly what they shared with us. What they want is to stay with their animals in their farms, and they're very much against the authorities. So the part of the conflict and the opposition comes from the fact that they're being pushed and forced to do something which they find if they do, their animals will die, and if they don't, if they refuse to follow the authorities, they manage to save the animals, the land, the property themselves, and actually they are successful in doing that, and that's their kind of flag. They flag that as a way to say, we know how to do things better than you do. So just to say that you'd be popular.
Yeah. I don't want to be popular in any case, but
No,
okay, for the measure, okay. But in any case, this is true for the farmers and for the animals, but it is also true for the people, which means that when we look on, for instance, what happened in June 2017, most of a huge number of people that die in the street, they were before into a pool inside Pedrógão Grande, and they run away and they die into the street. Okay, so the idea is not to communicate and to transmit the information for the people that they are more safe if they remain in a safe place and say, okay, the center of the village is a safe place. This is not going to burn, okay? So and the problem is the people, namely the ones that are not farmers, because the farmers, they know quite well the fire, so they don't want to run away. But in some cases with people that is okay, they are tourists, they are doing some they are running away, or in this particular case, they run away, they get the cars, and with the consequences are well known. So the idea is also, okay, maintain calm, and the evacuation should always made only when someone from fighters or for policy, someone say to the people, okay, it's time to go, okay, and the way to go is this one, okay, not to take, not people to take this kind of individual decisions which can be fatal at the end. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, first I should do a disclosure statement, which is that although I am a technician of the Institute of Nature Conservation and Forests, I never worked in this theme. I'm not expert on this, and I'm here talking in from my personal perspective as a technician and from my own experience, really. To connect with what José said, I agree that the evacuation plans should be rethink. I think there was a huge tragedy in 2017, and obviously evacuation plans were the priority to save people. I think local knowledge now, after these years, and knowledge about animals would help to redesign the evacuation plans and to support people to relocate their domestic animals, which obviously is very important, and it's one of the main concerns. In terms of policy of the forest, let's say in a wide sense, I would like to point three aspects. One is about, because policies support plantation or replantation, they recover. And unfortunately, in my opinion, they still support plantation of eucalyptus or coniferous plants, which obviously bring a risk, but José can say better than me, bring a higher risk of future fires. So I think it looks like we're going around in a circle, and to get out of that circle, I think the subsidies, they already exist to native woodlands, to replant, but they're not very convenient, they're not so profitable at the short term. So if a landowner has to choose, he might go to the easiest and short-term profit, and that at the macro scale just creates a problem. So I think we have to look definitely the policy of support subsidies, which is at the European level as well for forests. And the third aspect, which I think is very important for wild animals during the fires, it's the corridors. We never had really a management plan that looked into the corridors, like the riverine vegetation. They've been very kind. In certain areas it's very narrow and it doesn't really allow, but they are escape exits for wild animals, and they should be absolutely maintained or reinforced in their width. Width, yes.
Maria, on the side of
Disclosure as well that I am not a fire expert. And a lot of good points have already been made. And I think these also tie into one of the questions that you posed for this panel about what would a multi-species wildfire governance or disaster governance look like. And definitely the evacuation zones or these safety zones of identifying, and also with the infrastructure in place or the corridors. So all of these really good points have been made about the land use policies as well. And just to highlight the education sector here is the school in Alvalade also found out the students here, they researched wildfires in Portugal and the eucalyptus, the monoculture here, and they came to some of the same conclusions that they presented here. So there's a lot that can be done with young people here too. And maybe this also brings into question the scales of governance and decision making. And I think we discussed this yesterday as well, about the opening that ABIDE has in discussing not just with the higher level decision makers, but also your work with the local communities who really have lived through this, who have the mechanisms in place of what to do, how to protect the animals, and really to design with the local communities and with their knowledge and experiences these alternative governance modes. And I think that's where it begins, that it's not going to come from higher up, that it's a bottom-up approach. And I think that's something, I don't know if that's something that you're planning to do or have already done, is create these alternative models of what could this look like with these local case examples that you are already working on. So I think that's something that has real potential in changing the discourse around multi-species fire governance.
Okay, I was just going to add that just recall a case where the local people, although they wanted to do a fire break, maybe it wasn't done in the best way, but they wanted to do a big fire break, where they would replant native, and the local community was against it, they were divided actually. So these commissions, local commissions, also have struggles, internal struggles. There's not many people left in certain villages. It's few people, few heads thinking. And I would think that to inform policies, there should be, maybe we could think of commissions where researchers would have a place as well. I always was a big fan of that old thing of, to support decision, we should have science. It looks like a very obvious thing, but I think it's been kind of forgotten a bit. And I think in new scenarios, we are even in more dangers of being forgotten. So I think researchers, and particularly people who work with fire and animals, could be in commissions advising policymakers. Bringing new perspectives, because often there's a discipline dominance here, and of course different disciplines bring other things.
So just to make sure I got it. So getting invited to those committees of how do we get invitation? So we need to get invited. Yeah, that's a very good point of working with the policymakers. Yes, thank you. So maybe it's time. I still have a couple of questions to prompt the discussion, but maybe it's time to make a tour in the audience to see if there are questions or comments that anyone would like to bring up.
Annoying to talk on the microphone. But this last comments made me think a lot of the Brazilian case, and I think this is the kind of discussion in which the geographical differences between the three case studies will be more delicate to deal with, because in Brazil, when you talk about this dynamic within a bottom-up approach and a kind of a hierarchical one, you are dealing with very powerful stakeholders. And I was saying before, like when they say todo perigoso aqui, like this idea of danger in the field, it's palpable on it's something that it's part of an everyday life, and it's something that it's not just concern the danger of like wild species or animals. It's like when I was saying that it's kind of a far west imaginary, I was talking kind of literally, and this is where it will be all the different between the kind of a Portugal, Australian scenario and a Brazilian one, especially Mato Grosso. Because not all of Brazil is the same, but Mato Grosso specifically has a lot of very big economic interests that we are touching when we are talking about fire and land use. And as I was saying in my presentation, fire is deeply connected with the use of agrotoxicos and I don't know how to say in English, but yeah, you know, the venenos and the poisons, yeah. And then there was something else I wanted to add on the last part that I'm starting to forget. But anyway, yeah, the idea of having a science-based opinion in this kind of discussions, it's very interesting because the kind of state institutions like the IBAM, I'm talking, of course, I'm talking about my case, then we have to make all these differences, but this kind of environmental institution that talks about environmental science are also the ones that take the most irrational decisions sometimes, like very for 2 days ago, I think it went out on the news, the IBAMA allowed against the like against the opinion of 29 scientists, allowed the exploitation of pieces of land, I think in the Amazonia. So even when the scientists are present, they cannot do that much, and sometimes their opinions are also used against the communities. And so sometimes we have, I think, to start a bit getting out of this idealization that science is the answer. Because sometimes in these cases, especially dealing with traditional indigenous communities, it is not at all. And if you are start to talk in these terms with them, they shut down and they see you kind of as an enemy. So you have to change your language and try to be more humile, a bit more in these approaches. But this was just because I think that it was a very interesting. It is an interesting conversation to keep having because there are no easy way out.
Yes, thank you for the comment. I think there's always a risk we have when introducing any scholar or any other professions to have honest and dishonest people, but the anthropologists have an amazing role there, because if they do field work, they can disentangle the network of relationships with industry, with other interests, hidden agendas. So if they're there, if social scientists are there, it's and if they do a serious work, it is very interesting for that to come up. We know that obviously scientists sometimes serve certain interests, that's for sure. In the comment about governance, and correct me if I'm wrong, although I know that Brazil is a complete different atmosphere, indigenous people have rights that local communities in Portugal do not have to participate in decision. There are mechanisms. They might not be used, they might be restricted, they might be imperfect, but the thought is there. The philosophy of participation is there, at least in conservation of nature, and rights to the territory, which in Portugal, I don't know, maybe the Maldives, yeah. But to a certain extent, it's not the same. So, you know, positive sides as well.
Thank you very much. Does anyone want us to comment on this comment? No other comments? Okay. Why?
Yeah, have actually, I need to decide, but I'm gonna decide like a roulette to expand on these ideas that I really like, and I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna always go back to your reference, Jose, but not only yours, but also Margarita, because I really like this idea of fire shelters and fire corridors. I just add the fire in front of shelters and corridors. But Jose mentioned this, at least this is my interpretation, and in connection to, first of all, fire shelters, I think why hasn't that, first of all, I wonder why it has not been implemented as a positive way, a viable way to, at least to contest or test the possibility for livestock in the relation between humans and animals, livestock and owners, basically, meaning animals that are domesticated and thus are turned into gregarious beings, animals that depend on humans. So if the humans are not there, they will probably not evacuate. They will follow the humans. They're already domesticated in that way. So they need to have fire shelters. And in that sense, the fire shelters as a form of education, training, if it will be possible, I'm reflecting, let's say in a future imagination, no, speculative, possible way, that fire shelters are prescribed in Cerro de Estrella. And let's say it will take years, it will take a lot of financing, but there is such a positive way I can imagine in the fact that you can train the livestock to learn, as well as the humans to be educated into when this disaster strikes, which is in a world of crisis, they don't have to evacuate, but they can take their own decisions and go basically underground. So it has to be kind of like a, it's terrible to compare, but similar to a bunker when a war strikes, right? But it's been proven that if it's well constructed architecturally, those shelters could work, both for humans and for the livestock. So for gregarious animals. Whereas for the fire corridors, it will be for the wildlife, right? For those animals that are actually mobile, migratory species, feral, and thus impossible to be domesticated. So they will learn on their own to use them, as animals do, through their wisdom, through their wittiness, through their, you know, their own sentience. For me, you both talk about this as, for me, it's like, why hasn't it been implemented? It's just clear, it's there. And it could be applied across the biomes. I mean, it doesn't have to fit the Portuguese case.
Why they did not yet implemented this? Maybe one of the reasons why is because, in fact, in the city where the decisions are made, the importance of the livestock is not so high, and this is the reason why the conflict exists with the farmers and with the owners. That is the problem. In fact. I'm a little bit, let's say, I would say that the guys that made the law in Portugal knows only a little about the country. They know very, very little about the country. They don't know the country finally. Okay, they know the motorways and they know the cities. And then the rest, okay, it is places they saw from the car driving 120 kilometers an hour. And this is, in fact, a problem we face. And then these people, they become quite surprised when the disasters like the ones that occurred in 2017 occurred in June or in October. They become, okay, amazing what happened, this is a disaster, and so on. But in fact, the situation is there. The problem is, okay, it was 2017 was almost 10 years ago. And what changed between 2017 and now? Only a few, maybe nothing at the end, which means that we are just prone to have another problem like this. It depends just on the weather. That is the point. Just on the weather. Because the situation in this country to face such kind of of hazard is the same like in 2000, maybe a little less. Let's say the civil protection in the next occasion will be much more interventive, doing what? Evacuation. And again, the animals will stay there alone. So this means that it is a little bit my view on the current situation is not very pleasant for the animals' perspective, because for them will be worst the next 2017, because the animals will be lost at the end. In some way, the 2024 or during the last wildfires, this already occurred. So the main objective of civil protection is to prevent the loss of lives of people. Yeah, they have this for sure. This orientation given from the ministry. Yeah.
This is very interesting. Just a quick note, because one of the results we have in the policies, there's this change in the policy documents in Portugal toward prevention, but it may focus only on humans. So this is an interesting thing to discuss. More on this in the table, Margarida and Maria.
Yeah, I wanted to add that there's also economical reasons for not implementing these measures, and also technical maybe. If you establish a corridor of 100 or 200 meters to evolve and be a more efficient corridor, you will take land away from replanting or whatever, or cultivation, whatever is happening in the fields. And this takes money away, because people receive a subsidy for each tree or for each hectare of plantation. So I think economics play quite a role here.
And also one will need to maintain it.
Exactly.
A corridor that breaks away the front way,
Yeah.
the flyway.
Yes.
So you need to maintain it.
Yeah. And they might come back to technicians and said, how much do we need with 150? And we're not sure, because we don't have a pilot study here yet. I wanted to tell you that there's interesting case that I witnessed in September 2004. Yes, when there were the fires in Montemuro.
And in Yarrade also.
Okay.
In July.
Yeah, so there's this livestock breeding in Portugal in certain areas is extensive, and the cattle is left during the summer by itself with maybe dogs. And the cows, this was a livestock breeder told me, the cows found their own way in between. They tried to evacuate them one way, and they had a different will, opinion, instinct, because they had their cubs somewhere else as well, and they escaped because they have already trails of their own. So domestic animals, once they spend some time in the wild environment, also bring back their instincts, which is very positive. Giving the chance, I'm quite positive they will find an exit.
And there's been similar stories of this from Australia, from where humans have tried to guide animals towards one way, but they refuse to go because they know, their instinct knows, they know where they should be headed. So it's, it's interesting.
Do you have anything to add on these questions? Okay. David.
Now it's, thank you so much for the discussion so far. So you talked about, you talked about the problems you identified, and Veronica, you added that, in your interviews, the farmers are pointing out these very problems, and then you also mentioned that when you're doing this with students, they also identify similar issues and solutions. I wanted to ask you about your views on citizen science or participatory science or action research, perhaps specifically in relation to ABIDE, the possibilities of doing that. And I know that Maria, I remember like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I attended a presentation, not by you, but by Thomas Ivelo on rats in cities. And I think you were part of that project, right? Yeah. Where you worked with students to both raise awareness about like animals in cities, but also to, I mean, allow them to participate in the research process. So I mean, it raised issues for the participants that they weren't aware of, but still they were also allowed to participate in the research. So participatory research does not just have to be about like letting go of control, and it can be like a mutual process, right? So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
But I can start to say that the ABIDE project previews a part of citizen science from the point of view of the conservation biology mostly. And we're still thinking, because now we're transitioning between biologists in the team, so we're still thinking of the research design that will follow. One of the possibilities we thought about was a BioBlitz, like a special day in which we could work with schools, for instance, and bring the children from several schools or from a specific village for a whole day, identify species and find the traces of animals and so on. So there is a plan to do so, and we're still thinking about it. But now immediately I'll pass it on to the panel to brainstorm about this, and I would start with Maria. If you would like to share your experience or the things that you know about these possible citizen science projects.
Now that you mentioned that you'll be working with schools, and I see scope to do a longer project, especially with the communities that have been affected.
Let me just clarify that the project it's not one of our targets, schools and students and adolescents and children, because that's a whole new, different problem in terms of ethics. So our project is not focused on the youngsters, but just a disclosure.
Yeah, but there's a lot of scope of what could be done with young people. And also, young people have fantastic ideas. More often better than the ones that we can come up with. So engaging with young people to co-design, some of the solutions for their own communities. I think engaging with young people early on in any kind of research process is great, whether through citizen science and in the project that you mentioned, the Citizens with Rats. So we looked at coexistence with difficult others. So animals that are often considered pests. So rats was the case study species to begin with. So that project had 3 stages. So first they worked with biologists with tracking plates to see if rats were in their area. Then we used multispecies ethnography to map out who else lives or shares these urban surroundings with us. And then the third phase was speculative storytelling. So we started to reimagine what could our communities look like for a more peaceable coexistence and whether that is possible. We combined different methods of working with young people But I think participatory methods and involving young people in any of the local community work that you do is a fantastic idea.
Citizen science?
Yeah. No. Let's say
about
risk related with it, which is not yes, of course I agree, and it is always the best solution when we are doing this kind of participatory issues regarding planning. The problem in some places in the inner central Portugal is the loss of critical mass, which means there is or in some places there is not any more children, and the number, and even you can find, if you want, we are not able to find the owners of the land. They are not there. They don't know where is my land. And yes, it is really complicated to manage this kind of landscape because there are no people. Yes, and this is an additional source of risk because the worst that can happen then is this land is become abandoned. There is no. This is a kind of nobody land. No, even from even there is no economy. In fact, in most of cases, there is not anymore these stands of eucalyptus or pinus. It is something not well treated, the land. So, in fact, we don't know what can we do with this kind of landscape. In any case, we know that if you don't do nothing, the probability to have a disaster increased a lot. So this is for sure. So the point is, someone must to pay the bill, and if we find the right people to give them the bill, then we can do something on this land, because something. I mean, I'm talking about the landscape management, let's say, because otherwise we can have been taking into account what we know about climate change in the next few years. I always used to say that in 2017, someone said to the Portuguese president for him to say that this is not reasonable to happen again. And I say the guy that said this for the president to say should be much more conservative, because it is not the end of the whole. There is.
It can
be worse.
Which
than
means
this.
it will get worse for the animals. So there's a
Yes,
lot
for
of
sure,
work to
for
do.
sure.
Thank you so much. I'll just add something which it's a bit anecdotal, but when the team goes for fieldwork in Serra da Estrela, the house where we stay used to be a primary school, but there are no children in that small village anymore. The village is very, very small, and so very wisely the municipality turned the school into a house they now rent for people like us, and also for foreigners and people on vacation. So just an anecdotal. Well, we are reaching our time. So to keep the time, there's a last question I would really much like to ask, but because we ran out of time, I would ask the very difficult task to our participants here in the table to give me just one word for this question. And the question is, how would the multi-species governance of wildfires look like? And in a word, how would you describe a multi-species governance of fires? One word. I know it's speculative, and to inspire the team in our work for the following months. We can use 2 to 3 words.
Play this first.
Now it's convenient.
Yeah.
How would it look like?
How would a multi-species governance of fire? So a governance of fire that includes animals.
It would look interdisciplinary, inclusive of local communities, inspired by the eyes or the gaze of the animals.
Those are really good words, and I'll just add that it would look just, peaceable, and ambitious.
Yeah. Okay. The nice words are already there in any case, but I think in any case that if we are able to not to leave the landscape alone, and because I would like to stress, because when we look on our models, for wildfire hazard and risk associated with climate change for the middle of the century and for the end of the century, the picture is quite bad. Okay, I will show you some maps next Saturday. And this means that if we do nothing on this landscape, we, together with the animals, we are only stop into the ocean, running in front of the fire, together with the animals, okay? Not only there, but also we. So we need to manage, we need to because the fire will be always a part of the ecosystem, and the idea is to try to not allow these fires to become mega fires, because when they become mega fires, then we are not able anymore to suppress, and for the animals for sure will not be a good notice this mega fire. So we need to do something. Yeah. There is the need.
And that means not leave people alone. So we need a populated, multi-species populated landscape with solidarity. So I will leave it here and by thanking our panel very much. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Margarida. Thank you, José César. And the final note to thank the audience and all the team and the advisors that participated, and also the audience online that followed us during these 2 days, and saying that keep an eye on our work. We'll be continuing this work for a few years more. There's more to come. It's a lot of work. Animals need us. So thank you for inspiring the ABIDE team along these days and for continuing to do so in the following years. Thank you so much.